All right, what are my values, guys?
0.
All right, what are they? How we do?
I'm not yet. Okay.
All right, so once you have it, you can sketch your values. So when it says sketch your values, you're like guesstimating on the y-axis. So the main thing is at -4, I'm gonna 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so at -4, I know it's in the positive area, right? It's up here. At -3, it's a intercept. Makes sense, right? Because what were our factors at? At -2, it's at a +6. At -1, it's back at 0. At 0, -36, it drops down all the way to here. At 1, it goes even further down. At 4, it comes back up. And then at 5, that's not 4. Erase the little dot. Erase the little dot. Thank you. At 4, we come back up. And then at 5, we go all the way off the board, right? So when I sketch this, I'm going to start from the left. Pew. That did not go through that line. It's really hard to draw, guys. I try so hard. And I want y'all to know that I mean well. I'm going to be the best artist I can be for you. Yep.
Yes.
Pretend we can't pretend. But this is now our new point right there. All right. All right, so there's my sketch. We can see what's physically happening to this graph, right? We can see oh, dang it. Nope. That's not our graph. And y'all just let me. Why is it not our graph? Someone tell me. It's an even function, which means that if I end positively, I need to start positively. Because I was tripping.
You're dumb. Like, I gotta erase the whole thing now.
I did. There we go. Fixed her. You saw nothing. I'm a little flustered.
Paper saw it.
All right. So now it says, on what interval is f of x greater than 0? When you're referring to f of x being greater than or less than 0, you are looking at the x-axis and you're saying, when am I above and below that x-axis? That's all that is asking you. Does that make sense? That is it. There's nothing else to it. So when you see f of x is greater than 0, it's asking you, when are you above the x-axis? When you see f of x is less than 0, you're asking yourself, when are you below the x-axis? Okay. When you're above and below the x-axis, that means your y values are either positive or negative. So if I'm above the x-axis, my y values are positive. If I'm below the x-axis, my y values are negative. Make sense? So it's asking from when to when do you get positive and negative y values. Okay. Make sense? I also see what I did wrong in our graph. I'm just going to tell you right now, you're going to hate me. If only you guys talk to me.
No.
It was, Isley. I forgot to put my multiplicity in there. It wasn't bad drawing. It was your teacher being a little flustered with 1,000 things in her mind. Fixed it. You saw nothing. Okay?
Paper. Erase.
All right, so here we go. On what interval? So we're looking for the x values of when this happens, okay? So when do I have positive y's? So from -infinity all the way up until here at -1. Do we see that? That's where we have it. So, and you're only telling me the x's. X tells me where x marks the spot. It's telling me where it's happening. So we know that I'm going to write it in interval notation. So from -infinity to -1, that is when f of x is greater than 0. Notice on the -1, I did not put a bracket because it doesn't say equal to 0. It says greater than, right? All right, where else am I greater than 0? You're right. To be even more exact, it needs to be fully split. Thank you, Isley. We're going to split it, and then we're going to rewrite it so that we're not including the equal parts. Because at -3, it equals 0. It's not greater than 0. All right, and then we have one more interval where we're above the x-axis, and that is at 4, right? And I'm going to squeeze it here. 4 to win, infinity and beyond. All right, now when are we below the x-axis? We are only below the x-axis from -1 to 4. Okay, so don't be intimidated when it asks you where is f of x greater than or less than 0. You're simply just telling me when are my x's going from positive to negative and negative to positive, okay? When you look at it from a table instead of a graph, you're paying attention to where your x-intercepts are. So I have an x-intercept here, x-intercept here, and an x-intercept here. And I'm going to determine whether these are above or below, okay? So when I'm looking at the table, I would just simply write in from -infinity up until this point, my y values are positive. From -3 to -1 up until this point, my y values are positive. From -1 to 4, my y values are negative. And then from 0 to positive infinity, my y values are positive. So from here alone, I can determine where I'm above and below without having to look at the table. Which is why Isaac was correct that we should have 3 intervals, because how many positive intervals do I have looking at the table? 3. All right, so the next part is just summarizing what we just talked about, okay? So here, putting it all together, when you are solving for f of x is greater than 0, all you're doing is finding out what x values make f of x positive. F of x are just simply your y's, right? What makes my y's positive? When you're looking at f of x is less than 0, you're just asking yourself, what x values are going to make my y values negative? Make sense? And that's what we just modeled. Okay. The best way of doing this on non-calculator parts of the test is called a sign chart. So we're going to go through how do you make a sign chart. All right. So making a sign chart is just using only your x-intercepts, your zeros. So first thing you're going to do is identify your zeros. Okay. So your zeros come from being in factored form. In factored form, I have x plus 3 and I have x minus 4. Do we see that? So I know that my zeros are at x equals -3 and at x equals +4. Agree? At the far left end of your sign chart, those are your that's negative infinity. At the far right end, that is your positive infinity. All right. After you've created your sign chart, found your zeros, the second step, bless you, is to choose any values in between and evaluate their sign. Okay. So you choose a point, well, choose x and evaluate. Which is what you did for that table. So I could choose any point. I'm always going to choose the smallest and 0 when possible. So between negative infinity and -3, I'm just going to choose -4. Between -3 and +4, I'm going to choose 0. And between 4 and infinity, I'm going to choose 5. These are the values that I'm going to take, plug in, which is what evaluate means to do, right? To plug in. So -4 plugged in is going to do what? -4 plus 3 is a negative, right? You're not finding the value. You're just telling what is the sign of its sum or difference, okay? So if I substitute in -4, I'm going to get a negative. -4 minus 4 is going to be what? It's going to be a negative, right? And it's going to be a negative square, which is going to make it a positive. So from negative infinity to -3, what is a negative times a positive going to make? A negative times positive is a negative. So this is a negative y situation. No matter what I plug in, the y's are going to be negative. Okay, let me repeat it again. I see some faces of confusion. I am not asking you to find the product. I am not asking you to find the sum of difference. I'm asking you only to tell me what would be the sum, but the sign of the sum and difference, and what would be the sign of the product. Okay, you're not actually evaluating. On the previous problem, you had to actually evaluate to fill in the table, right? On a sign chart, you're only paying attention to what are the signs of their outcome. Okay, so again, I chose -4. I'm going to evaluate -4. -4, not +3, and I'm going to look at -4 minus 4 squared. A -4 plus 3 is going to produce a negative number, right? Agreed? -4 minus 4 squared is going to produce a positive number, correct? Their difference is going to be positive. And then here, a negative times a positive is a negative. So all y values between -infinity and -3 are going to be negative. Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay, let's try it again. You're plugging in 0. I mean, you can stop and ask me because I don't know. I'm not making sense. See, Ms. Jones, you're not making sense to me. Third time's the charm. Here we go. Okay? All you're doing is telling me the sign. If you want to go through and evaluate, if for whatever reason this is not clicking in your brain, then multiply. Give yourself more to do. Okay? If it's not working for you to just say, I only want to know the sign on the sign chart, then multiply. Do what you want to do if that's not helping you. But you are not actually having to find the value. You're just telling me, will the outcome, will the y values be positive or negative? Okay? So if you need to actually do -4 plus 3 times -4 minus 4 squared, that's going to give me -1 times -16 squared. That's going to give me what? What happens here? What's 16 squared? 256. Okay. So we get -256. What is the outcome here? The outcome is negative. We do not care what the number is. We just want to know, is it positive or negative? Which is why I'm telling you, you do not have to fully evaluate. You're just telling me the sum and difference is positive or negative. Their product is positive or negative. Sum or difference is positive or negative. The product is positive or negative. That's it. That's what a sign chart is about. It's not actually evaluating. It is just determining and I probably shouldn't use that. I should have said, quote unquote, evaluate. Okay. Because I don't want you to waste time trying to multiply. I just want you to tell me if my outcome is positive or negative. That is it. So for this case, the first sum or difference, or basically sum, it was a negative situation, right? It would be negative. And then the next one would be a positive. And any negative times any positive is going to produce a negative. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing for 0. I plug in 0. 0 plus 3 is going to give me a positive. Yes. 0 minus 4 squared is going to also give me a positive. So my final outcome is going to be positive. Yay? Okay. 5. I plug in 5. 5 plus 3 is positive, right? 5 minus 4 squared is positive. So my final outcome is going to be positive. That's all a sign chart wants you to do, to tell me the signs of my results, okay? So where are my zeros? Well, we have zeros at x equals -3 and x equals 4. Where am I positive? Well, I'm positive from -3 to 4 and from 4 to infinity, which makes sense because at 4, we have that multiplicity, which stops us from changing our signs. So I'm positive from -3 to 4 and from 4 to infinity. Okay, this U is the mathematical symbol for and. Okay, where am I negative? I'm negative from, and that's where it's at. That's all a sign chart is only focusing on the signs. Yes? All right. That took a little longer than I thought. All right, so let's see a whole problem from start to finish. How and when would an inequality problem look like at this point where we're at? It is not necessarily going to be already isolated. You're going to have to isolate the, get one side equal to 0, and then define from there, okay? As far as reading it, just make sure you know what your less than and greater than symbols look like, right? The less than is the one that almost makes an L, correct? Greater than is the other, all right? So first thing you want to do is one side needs to equal 0. So we need to get one side needs to become 0. Okay? In order to do that, what do? You just move the terms, right? You're going to move things across in order for them to be all on one side. So I'm going to just go ahead and subtract the 4x squared, and I'm going to add 16. So that leaves me with x cubed minus 4. I'm going to write it in sequential order. No, I was doing it right. Minus 4x squared minus 4x plus 16 is now less than or equal to 0. Okay. After that, now we're going to factor. This is a cubic, and it's a fourth term cubic, which means that I can factor this by grouping. Okay. This is an example of factoring by grouping. Factoring by grouping is basically you're going to pair them up and use GCF to factor. Okay. So the GCF between my first two terms is x squared. The GCF between my second two terms, if the leading is negative, then your GCF is negative. So it's going to be a -4. Do you remember that? Okay. So we have our GCFs, which is x squared minus 4. And when we factor them out, what are we left with? Well, -4x divided by -4 is x. 16 divided by -4 is -4. Okay. This is not fully factored. Do you guys remember difference of two squares? A dot situation. If you have two perfect squares that are being subtracted, that means that it can be factored some more. All you're doing is taking the square root of the first term and the square root of the second term. So we end up with x minus 2 times x plus 2 and x minus 4. So now I am fully factored because I used my previous taught factoring skills. Okay. Your critical values are your x's. Where are my zeros? So in this case, we have zeros where? Our zeros are at -2, 2, and 4. So these are the values that make up my sign chart. Does that make sense? So these are the values that are on my sign charts. When I have my sign chart, remember all the way to the left is negative infinity. And now I have -2, I have +2, I have +4, and I have positive infinity. Once you establish your sign chart, you're now going to choose values in between those intervals to test what their signs are. Does it matter which values you choose? No, but I strongly encourage you don't choose obnoxiously large ones. So I'm going to use -3, I'm going to use 0, I'm going to use +3, and I'm going to use 5. And then I'm going to evaluate where they are negative and positive. Does that make sense? Okay. And then that's all you have to do. And then you can answer any questions that follow from that. So the solution here is it's asking when is it less than or equal to, right? So I'm looking for when am I below, when am I negative? Make sense? Yep. So when I plug in -3 into here, to my factored form, -3 minus 2 is going to produce a negative. -3 plus 2 is going to produce a negative. -3 minus 4 is going to produce a negative. So what is going to be my final outcome here?
Negative.
A negative. Make sense? And then you do it again. Okay?
Yep.
All you're doing is paying attention to the signs. Only the sign. Okay? You should be able to complete your 1A.5, then your 1B.5 assignment in the green packet. Remember, for the green packet, odds are required, evens are what? Extra credit.
Maybe.
Thanks.